She stepped into the real estate office wearing a faded blouse tucked neatly into a pair of well-worn slacks. Her sandals clicked softly against the polished floor as she approached the reception desk. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee and fresh paint, the kind of place designed to look more expensive than it really was. A cheerful bell chimed overhead as she entered, but the woman behind the counter barely glanced up from her computer. "Excuse me," she said with a small smile. "I am looking for a commercial property listing. I think I might be in the right place." The receptionist blinked at her slowly, taking in her modest clothes, her plain leather handbag, and the absence of anything resembling a designer label. "This is Cambridge Property Group," she replied curtly. "We deal in premium listings, residential, commercial, and luxury only." The woman nodded kindly, undeterred. "That is exactly what I am here for. I was hoping to speak with an agent today, if one is available." From the corner office, a man in a fitted gray suit had overheard the conversation. He was tall, with hair so precisely combed it looked lacquered. Philip Turner, senior partner and sales director. He had built a reputation on catering to elite clients, and he prided himself on his ability to read people instantly. As he stepped out of his office, his eyes scanned the woman quickly. No jewelry, no brand-name handbag, no visible makeup. Just a calm expression and hopeful posture. The kind of person who wandered in by mistake, or worse, someone wasting his time. "Ma'am," he said smoothly, his voice like polished granite, "perhaps you are looking for one of the rental agencies down the street. We specialize in commercial sales, large-scale properties, office spaces, developments." She smiled gently, still composed. "I understand. I was actually hoping to inquire about your available units on Concord Avenue. I read that there was a building currently on the market there. It is near the children's clinic." Philip paused for just a moment, a flicker of something crossing his face. That building was indeed listed with their office. It was valued at $3.2 million and had just gone live the week before. "That property," he said slowly, "requires verified financial documentation before we entertain walk-in inquiries. Do you have pre-approval letters from a commercial lender, or perhaps proof of assets?" The woman's face remained calm. "I do not have those documents with me today, but I am prepared to provide them upon request. I simply wanted to begin the conversation and better understand the listing." Behind her, a couple dressed in tailored suits entered the lobby, chatting in low tones. Philip's attention drifted instantly. He offered them a wide, practiced smile. "If you will excuse me," he said, turning his back to her. "Our agents are currently occupied. You are welcome to leave your name and number at the desk. Someone will get back to you." She stood there for a second, the brush of dismissal as soft and sharp as a paper cut. Then she nodded politely and stepped aside, giving the floor to the couple behind her. She left the office quietly, not a trace of anger on her face, but something in the way she held her chin, the calm certainty in her walk, said the story was far from over. Philip Turner closed a deal that afternoon worth over $900,000. He celebrated with a glass of sparkling cider in his office, flipping through listings with the confident ease of a man who believed he had the world figured out. The interaction that morning had barely registered in his memory. Just another passerby, another day, another notch in a week of strong leads. That night, he mentioned nothing of the encounter to his wife, though he did complain briefly about looky-loos wasting everyone's time. The next morning, Cambridge Property Group was humming with quiet activity when a sound stopped everyone mid-motion. A deep purr, low and unmistakably luxurious, echoed through the front glass wall. Heads turned. Outside, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled into the private parking space normally reserved for the firm's partners. It glinted beneath the morning sun, its paint polished to a mirror shine, its windows tinted with elegance and precision. A uniformed chauffeur stepped out, walked with dignity to the rear door, and opened it. From the back seat emerged a man tall in stature, immaculately dressed, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of calm presence that filled a room before he even entered it. Alexander Whitmore, billionaire entrepreneur, founder of Whitmore Holdings, a man known for reshaping entire urban blocks and bankrolling educational foundations without ever once speaking to the press. He rarely made personal visits. which made his arrival at Cambridge Property Group not just unusual, but unforgettable. The receptionist scrambled to stand. Philip, sipping his morning espresso, nearly choked when he saw who it was. He rose so quickly he knocked over a stack of brochures. "Mr. Whitmore," he called, smoothing his tie as he approached. "It is an honor. What brings you to our office today?" Alexander's eyes scanned the room calmly before settling on Philip. His voice was even, polite, almost friendly. "I am here to speak with the agent who handles the Concord Avenue property. My wife visited yesterday. She was hoping to get information, but it seems there was some confusion." Philip's smile faltered slightly, though he tried to recover. "Yes, of course we—" But Alexander raised a hand gently. "You dismissed her." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The receptionist visibly froze. A junior agent standing nearby stopped flipping through her files. Philip's mouth opened and closed. "I was not aware—" "She wore a faded blouse," Alexander continued, "and sandals. She asked polite questions. You told her to leave a number and suggested she visit a rental agency." He paused. "That was my wife, Mr. Turner." Philip Turner felt the color drain from his face. He tried to compose himself, but the words came out scattered, like loose change dropped on the floor. "Mr. Whitmore, I assure you there was no intention of disrespect. If I had known—" Alexander tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "If you had known what? That she was wealthy? That she was connected to someone powerful? Or simply that she belonged?" Philip stammered, "Of course not. It was a misunderstanding, a simple oversight. I apologize deeply for any offense caused." Across the office, several agents were pretending to look busy while straining to hear every word. A few had witnessed the encounter the day before and now stared at Philip as if seeing him for the first time. "I am not here to collect apologies," Alexander said calmly, "but I do find it necessary to clarify a few things. My wife, Eleanor, has been researching properties to house a new women's rehabilitation and employment center. It is part of a project we are funding entirely from our own foundation. She prefers to do her research personally, quietly, without fanfare." His gaze sharpened. "Because she believes the best way to understand a community is to walk among it, not hover above it." Philip had gone silent, nodding stiffly, his earlier confidence completely gone. "She came here in good faith," Alexander continued. "She asked about a property we are prepared to purchase. She was dismissed without being heard. That tells me what kind of culture is being promoted in this office." There was a heavy pause. No one moved, no one breathed. The quiet was deafening. Finally, Alexander stepped back and straightened his jacket. "I will take the Concord Avenue property," he said evenly, "at the asking price, in cash, but only if the paperwork is handled by an agent other than yourself, preferably someone who knows how to listen." He turned toward a young woman standing nearby, wide-eyed but composed. "You," he said, pointing. "What is your name?" She blinked, startled. "Isabel. Isabel Harris. Do you know the Concord Avenue file?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I prepared the internal packet just last week." "Good," Alexander said. "Then I would like to finalize the transaction with you." She swallowed hard but nodded. "Yes, of course. I will retrieve the paperwork right away." "Thank you." Alexander turned back to Philip, offering a polite smile that had no warmth in it. "A little humility can be a valuable asset in this business, Mr. Turner. Perhaps you will remember that the next time someone walks through your doors without a tailored suit." Without another word, he followed Isabel toward the conference room. The transaction moved swiftly. Within an hour, Alexander Whitmore had signed for the entire property. No haggling, no negotiations, just clear instructions, verified documentation, and a signature in blue ink. Isabel handled each step with quiet professionalism, checking and double-checking everything, her hands steady even as her thoughts raced. When it was done, Alexander rose and shook her hand firmly. "You did well, Miss Harris. Thank you." She managed a small, proud smile. "It was an honor, sir." He nodded, then gestured toward the door. "I will be sending someone over to survey the property later this week. Please ensure access is granted. My wife will also be stopping by." Isabel nodded again. "Of course. I will make sure of it." As he exited the room, the office watched in near reverent silence. Philip Turner stood near the reception desk, his expression unreadable, his jaw clenched. As Alexander walked past him, he paused once more. "For what it is worth," he said softly, "you are not the first person to underestimate my wife, but most of the others now work in different industries." Then he walked out the door, climbed into the back of the Phantom, and disappeared into the city traffic like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Eleanor Whitmore stood barefoot in her garden, watering a row of lavender by hand. The phone buzzed softly in her pocket. She glanced at the screen and answered. "It is done," Alexander said on the other end. "You now own the Concord Avenue property." Eleanor smiled slightly, though her eyes remained thoughtful. "How did it go?" "About how we expected," he replied. "Turner nearly passed out. I let him keep his job, for now." "You always were more diplomatic than I am. You always were more gracious than anyone deserves." There was a pause, then Alexander added, "But there is more." The young woman who took over the paperwork, Isabel, she was impressive, calm, capable. "I want to see if she is open to consulting on the center's development." "I like that idea," Eleanor replied. "People who act with quiet integrity are rare." She reminded me of Daniel. "Yes," Alexander said. "Same backbone, same decency." Eleanor was silent for a moment. Then she said, "I do not want them to be afraid of me. I just want them to see me. That is all." Alexander's voice was soft. "They will." As the call ended, Eleanor set down the watering can and looked out over her garden. It was not about revenge. It never had been. It was about planting something in a place where someone once told you nothing could grow. The following week, Cambridge Property Group was abuzz with whispered conversations and careful glances. Philip Turner had returned to his usual routine, but something had shifted. His emails were answered faster, his meetings were shorter, and his voice carried just a little less certainty than before. Around the office, agents spoke more kindly to walk-ins. They listened more attentively. Even the receptionist now greeted visitors with a smile that reached her eyes. At first, it had all felt like damage control, but then something else happened. Eleanor Whitmore arrived. She did not call ahead. She did not send a representative. She simply appeared one morning wearing the same sandals, the same faded blouse, and carrying a worn leather folder under her arm. She walked through the doors with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. And this time, people noticed. Isabel Harris was the first to greet her. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said warmly, "it is so good to see you again." Eleanor returned the smile. "Please call me Eleanor. I came to discuss a few modifications to the Concord Avenue project." Isabel led her to the conference room, where fresh water had already been placed. She had anticipated the visit. As they sat down, Eleanor opened the folder and pulled out neatly typed plans for the center, blueprints for therapy rooms, vocational training spaces, and a small rooftop garden. "This building," she explained, "will not be just a shelter. It will be a stepping stone, a place where women who have faced hardship can reclaim their sense of purpose. But I want to make sure we are partnering with people who understand that mission." Isabel listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and offering suggestions about zoning permits and accessibility features. Eleanor was impressed, and more than that, she felt respected. For the first time in many visits to similar offices, she was being spoken to as a peer, not a profile, not a prospect. Just a woman building something meaningful. As the meeting came to a close, Philip lingered outside the conference room, pretending to review a file. He had not approached Eleanor directly since that first encounter, unsure of what, if anything, could be salvaged. But when she emerged, she paused in front of him. "Mr. Turner," she said quietly. "Mrs. Whitmore," he replied, straightening his tie reflexively. "I wanted to apologize again, truly. My actions were inexcusable." She studied him for a moment, her expression neutral. "What have you done since then?" He blinked. "Excuse me?" "To correct the behavior, to ensure no one else walks in and receives the same treatment." His mouth opened, then closed. He fumbled. adjusted some policies, internally, discussed staff training. And have you changed? She asked plainly, because no policy matters unless it comes from belief. The words hung between them, heavy and honest. Philip exhaled. I would like to say yes, but I think I am still learning. Or unlearning, maybe. I judged you. Quickly. Wrongly. I saw clothes, not purpose. That is on me. Eleanor nodded slowly. That is a start. She turned to leave, then paused. We are looking for advisory board members for the new center, people with real estate knowledge. You have the experience, but we need more than that. We need perspective. He looked startled. You would consider me? We consider everyone, she said, until they prove themselves unworthy. Her tone was not harsh, just true. And then she walked away, leaving Philip Turner standing in the middle of his office, less certain, but more aware. That evening, Alexander and Eleanor Whitmore sat on the balcony of their home overlooking the harbor. The sun dipped into the water, casting long orange streaks across the waves. How was the visit? Alexander asked, pouring 2 cups of tea. Eleanor took one, her fingers wrapping around the warm porcelain. Unexpectedly promising, she replied. Isabel is going to be an asset. And Philip, well, we will see. He is not as arrogant now. A little humility crept in through the cracks. Alexander smiled. You are good at finding cracks. I am good at giving second chances, she said, because someone once gave one to me. 3 weeks later, the Concord Avenue property began its transformation. What had once been a bland office building with cracked pavement and fading signage slowly turned into a place of color, intention, and purpose. Local contractors were hired not just for efficiency, but for their alignment with the foundation's values. Eleanor made it a point to meet each crew personally. She asked about their families, their stories, and how they had come into the trade. When deliveries arrived late or blueprints had to be revised, she never raised her voice. She simply asked how to solve the issue together. Her approach baffled some at first. They were used to clients who issued demands, not invitations, but her way worked. The project moved forward with a kind of harmony rarely seen in commercial development. People stayed late not because they had to, but because they wanted to be part of something that mattered. Isabel Harris became the on-site liaison, balancing her office responsibilities with daily check-ins. She brought coffee to the morning crews, coordinated permits, and even spent one Saturday helping repaint a mural wall designed by local artists. Philip Turner visited once, standing just outside the construction tape. He did not say much, only nodded as Isabel gave him updates, but he kept coming back, quietly, not as a supervisor, not as a partner, just as a man trying to understand something he had missed the first time. Slowly, he started bringing useful things, an extra shade umbrella, donated supplies, a contact for affordable eco-lighting, each offering small, each one noticed, no announcement, no credit, just a presence that asked nothing and hoped perhaps to give back a little more than he had once taken. When the building was finally complete, the Whitmore Center for Empowerment and Renewal hosted its opening gala on a clear spring evening. Invitations had been extended to local officials, community leaders, former residents of shelters, and every worker who had helped raise the center from concrete to vision. Inside, soft lighting warmed the walls and gentle music floated through the halls. Therapy rooms were staged for tours. The rooftop garden was lit by fairy lights. The entire building felt like a breath of possibility. At the heart of it stood Eleanor, wearing a simple navy dress and a silver pendant shaped like an open door. She moved through the crowd with the same grace she had shown the day she walked into the real estate office. Only now, there was no underestimation, just admiration. A quiet applause followed her wherever she went. Not loud, not forced, just the natural sound of people recognizing someone who had done something real. Isabel stood near the welcome desk, helping coordinate speeches and seating. Philip Turner hovered beside her, not as a leader but as a helper, checking name cards and offering chairs to elderly guests. You do not have to do all this, Isabel whispered at one point. I know, he replied. That is exactly why I want to. Near the end of the evening, Alexander stepped onto the small platform set up near the entrance. The room quieted. Thank you all for being here, he began. "This center is a dream my wife carried quietly for years. It is built not just of bricks and funding, but of stories, hard stories, brave stories, and the belief that dignity is something no one should have to earn. It is something they should never have to lose." He paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. "We almost did not build here," he added, "because someone in this very room once told my wife, without saying it directly, that she did not belong, that her clothes made her invisible, that her presence made them uncomfortable. And now, that same person has become a volunteer, a donor, and a student of a lesson we all need to relearn from time to time." He nodded gently toward Philip, who stood very still. "That our first glance is rarely the whole story, and sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the most to teach us." The applause that followed was not the kind that demanded attention. It was the kind that lingered, wrapping around the room in waves of warmth, a sound not of formality, but of recognition. Philip Turner remained still at the back of the gathering space, his hands clasped, his breath shallow. He had spent a career commanding rooms like this one, speaking with certainty, closing million-dollar deals with the stroke of a pen. But now, standing in a building his choices had once tried to deny, he felt something deeper than pride or embarrassment. He felt changed. Around him, guests returned to mingling. Couples strolled through the art gallery space on the second floor, pausing to admire portraits painted by survivors who had once been without homes, voices, or advocates. Downstairs, a child's laughter echoed through the hall where a small play area had been created beside the counseling offices. It was not loud, but it was enough to remind everyone why the center mattered. Eleanor Whitmore stepped away from the garden to find Philip still rooted near the door. She did not rush to him. She simply walked at her pace and stopped at his side. "You stayed," she said softly. "Of course," Philip replied. "This place, it matters. It mattered when I first came to your office too," she said gently, "but no one listened." Philip nodded slowly, a quiet acceptance in his posture. "I thought I understood people. Years in sales, in real estate. I thought I had seen everything, but all I had really learned was how to categorize, how to profile." He glanced around. "But this place, these people, they defy that. Every one of them is more than I would have guessed." Eleanor looked out across the crowd. "We all start somewhere. What matters is whether we stay there." He turned to face her. "I would like to be useful, not as a title, not as a name on a plaque, just useful." She considered him, her eyes unreadable, and then gave a single nod. "Good. There is a new program starting next quarter. Career training for women re-entering the workforce. We need mentors, people who can teach negotiation, client relations, market dynamics. I can do that," he said without hesitation. "And I would like to bring Isabel in. I have been mentoring her quietly. She is good. Better than I was at her age. She sees people." Eleanor smiled. "Then she will fit right in." A few weeks later, the first workshop was underway. Eleanor watched from the back of the room as Philip stood in front of a half circle of women, each with a notepad and an expression that ranged from wary to curious. He did not wear a suit, just a buttoned shirt with rolled sleeves and a pair of scuffed shoes. He spoke with honesty. He shared stories of bad deals and good instincts, of moments when perception blinded him to opportunity. He asked questions, and more importantly, he listened. Outside the classroom, Eleanor sipped her tea and glanced through the glass door as Isabel joined the group, assisting with a role-play exercise. The sight made her think of herself years ago, stepping into rooms where no one believed she had anything to offer, where silence was her only armor. And now, those rooms were hers, not to dominate, but to open. The garden out back had begun to bloom. Herbs grew in clean rows, tended by residents each morning. A single sunflower had begun to rise above the others, defiant in its height. A boy named Samuel, no older than 9, had planted it in memory of his mother, who once slept in a shelter before finding her way here. One afternoon, as Philip was helping restock books in the center's lending library, Thomas approached him again. The boy's energy was calmer these days, focused. "You still show up," Thomas said, watching him shelve a stack of paperbacks. "Every week," Philip replied with a nod. You could be anywhere else. Philip smiled. I am exactly where I need to be. My mom says people like you do not usually stick around. She is not wrong, Philip said. But sometimes people realize too late what matters, and if they are lucky, they get a second chance to do it differently. Thomas gave a small shrug and handed him another book. You are not bad. You are still kind of weird, but not bad. Philip laughed. I will take that as a win. Later that evening, Eleanor and Alexander walked the perimeter of the building, hand in hand, watching as the lights turned off room by room. How does it feel? Alexander asked. To see this place become real? Like a seed that refused to die, she replied, even when everyone said the soil was wrong. He looked at her, his voice low and steady. You were never just the woman in sandals. You were always the architect, the foundation. So were you, she said. You believed in the blueprint. Outside, the Rolls-Royce Phantom sat in the drive, polished but quiet. No fanfare, no photographers, just a vehicle waiting in stillness. Because this time, it was not the car that told the story. It was the building behind it, the one built by the woman they had once refused to serve. Months passed, and the Whitmore Center for Empowerment and Renewal became more than a project. It became a fixture of the community. Each week brought new faces through its doors, women seeking legal assistance, job placement, mental health counseling. Some arrived cautious, shoulders tense, eyes wary from too many broken promises. Others arrived clinging to hope so fragile that a single wrong word could shatter it. But the center did not break them. It built them. And Eleanor was there often, not as a figurehead, but as a participant. She taught classes on financial literacy. She led group discussions on rebuilding self-esteem. She sat on worn couches, listening to stories not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Alexander visited too, sometimes with donated books tucked under his arm, sometimes with nothing but a willingness to listen. The residents loved him instantly, sensing the genuine care beneath his polished exterior. Outside, the rooftop garden flourished. Tomatoes, basil, and lavender spilled over the edges of planters. The once bare concrete space had been transformed into an oasis of color and scent. Children ran between the beds with watering cans, volunteers laughed over shared lunches, and women who had once known only survival now spoke about dreams. Isabel Harris grew into a leadership role naturally, her calm competence inspiring the team. She coordinated programs, brokered partnerships with local businesses, and even proposed the idea of a second center on the other side of the city. Eleanor loved the idea. Expansion not for the sake of reputation, but for reach, to touch more lives before the world tried to tell them they did not matter. One afternoon, while painting a mural on the back wall of the center with a group of teenagers, Eleanor noticed a familiar figure lingering by the fence. Philip Turner. Not in a suit, but in jeans and a simple shirt, holding a stack of flyers under his arm. She wiped her hands on a rag and walked over. Recruiting for the job fair? She asked, glancing at the papers. Trying, he said sheepishly. It turns out not everyone trusts a real estate guy. Eleanor smiled. Maybe because some of them met the old you. He laughed genuinely. Fair enough. He looked toward the center. I think about it every day, what I almost missed, what I almost contributed to destroying. You are building now, she said simply. That matters. As fall crept into the city, the leaves outside the Whitmore Center turned brilliant shades of red and gold. The first cohort of program graduates prepared for their transitions, some moving into permanent housing, others starting new jobs, others beginning college classes funded through scholarships created by the foundation. A ceremony was planned, modest, beautiful, true to the spirit of the place. Eleanor stood at the entrance that morning, welcoming family members and guests, shaking hands, exchanging hugs. She wore the same faded leather bag slung over her shoulder that she had carried into Cambridge Property Group all those months ago. A reminder, not of bitterness, but of beginnings. Philip arrived early, helping set up chairs and arranging bouquets donated by a local florist who had once needed help herself. Alexander handled logistics with quiet efficiency, managing traffic flow and making sure every guest found a place. When the ceremony began, Eleanor stepped up to the small podium set under the newly installed pergola. The sun filtered through the beams, casting soft patterns on her face. "Today," she said, her voice strong and even, "we celebrate journeys. Journeys that did not start with privilege or certainty, journeys that started with courage." She looked across the sea of faces, some smiling, some tearful, all changed. This center was never about charity. It was about recognition, about building a space where dignity could be restored and futures could be rewritten. She paused, letting the words settle. Every person here has fought battles most people never see, and every person here deserves to be seen, to be valued, not because of the clothes they wear, the car they drive, or the degrees on their wall, but because of the light they carry inside them. The audience erupted into applause. No pretense, no politeness, just raw emotion. Afterward, graduates came forward one by one to receive certificates, hugs, and cheers. Families took pictures. Children chased balloons across the lawn. In a quiet moment, as the celebration continued around her, Eleanor felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find a woman she had never met before, holding a small notebook. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said, her voice trembling. "I walked into a real estate office once looking for help, and they laughed at me, told me I could not afford anything. I almost gave up that day." Eleanor touched her arm gently. "But you did not." "No," she said, tears slipping free, "because now I am here, because of you." Eleanor pulled her into a hug, neither speaking for a long moment. Around them, life continued. Music played, laughter rang out. Dreams, once whispered in fear, were now spoken aloud in confidence. And somewhere, across the city, in a sleek office where polished shoes still paced marble floors, someone remembered that day when a simple woman walked in asking only to be heard and changed everything forever. Winter settled over the city like a soft gray blanket, muting colors and slowing movements. The Whitmore Center adapted as it always did. Heaters buzzed quietly, the rooftop garden went dormant under protective tarps, and the community spaces inside grew even more vibrant as the temperatures dropped. Eleanor spent more time at the center than at home, organizing winter coat drives, overseeing emergency shelter preparations, and personally mentoring a group of women who had expressed interest in becoming advocates themselves. Isabel expanded the programs, launching an evening class series for financial independence and parenting support. Philip continued volunteering, tutoring residents, studying for their real estate licenses, and organizing networking events with local business owners willing to offer apprenticeships. Slowly but surely, a ripple effect was growing beyond the center's walls. New employers signed pledges to offer interviews without appearance-based bias. Local government officials began citing the Whitmore Center model in meetings about urban development. Even Cambridge Property Group, once a symbol of exclusion, had undergone a transformation. Philip had pushed through a new policy requiring annual training on unconscious bias, community engagement partnerships, and a zero-tolerance stance toward discrimination of any kind. He also insisted that every employee spend at least 20 hours a year volunteering at the center or similar organizations. At first, the changes were met with skepticism. Some agents rolled their eyes, muttering about optics and public relations, but the results were undeniable. Business improved, client satisfaction soared, and somewhere along the way, people stopped seeing the policies as burdens and started seeing them as standards. In a quiet office on the second floor of the center, Eleanor kept a small bulletin board where she pinned letters, drawings, and snapshots given to her by residents. It was messy and beautiful, a collage of hope stitched together by countless hands. One afternoon, as snow drifted lazily past the windows, she stood before it, a cup of tea warming her fingers. Alexander joined her, slipping his arm around her waist without a word. Together, they looked at the board, at the faces and stories that now filled the space where cynicism once might have lived. "Do you think they know?" Eleanor asked softly. "How much they have changed me, too." Alexander kissed her temple gently. "I think they know. I think they feel it every time you listen without judgment, every time you fight quietly and persistently for their place in this world." Spring returned with a vengeance, chasing away the last of the snow and painting the city in shades of green and gold. The Whitmore Center celebrated its first full year with a weekend festival open to the entire community. Food trucks lined the streets outside, local bands played upbeat tunes, children wove between crowds with painted faces and balloon animals. Inside the center, residents gave tours, proudly showing visitors the classrooms, therapy spaces, and rooftop garden now blooming once again. Eleanor spent the morning greeting guests at the front entrance, handing out brochures and answering questions. She wore her favorite linen dress and simple sandals, the same ones from that pivotal day at the real estate office. A quiet statement. A full circle. Philip manned the career booth inside, assisting residents who were ready to launch small businesses. Isabel coordinated the performances on the outdoor stage, managing schedules with the grace of a seasoned professional. In the late afternoon, a small ceremony honored volunteers and community partners. Eleanor was called to the stage unexpectedly. She protested lightly but made her way up, cheeks flushed. Isabel handed her a plaque. It was simple. No gold trim, no dramatic font, just a line etched into smooth wood. For seeing us. Eleanor looked out over the crowd, her voice catching slightly when she spoke. When I first walked into an office asking about Concord Avenue, I was not seeking pity. I was not seeking approval. I was seeking possibility. I walked in as myself, and that should have been enough. Here, now, for each of you, it will always be enough. She held the plaque to her heart as the audience rose in a standing ovation, not because she had built a building, but because she had built belief. Later, as dusk turned the sky a deep lavender, Eleanor wandered through the rooftop garden. Rows of flowers nodded in the breeze. She found herself by the old sunflower, now taller than ever, bending slightly under the weight of its golden head. Thomas joined her there, now taller himself, his wheelchair adorned with colorful stickers collected over the year. "It is still standing," he said, grinning, "even after the snow." Eleanor laughed, crouching beside the plant. "It was planted with love. Those roots go deep." Thomas looked at her, serious for a moment. "So do yours." She hugged him then, fiercely and without words. Somewhere below, the quiet purr of an engine signaled Alexander's arrival to pick her up. She glanced over the edge of the rooftop to see the familiar black Rolls-Royce waiting at the curb, but it no longer felt like a symbol of anything except what it had always been, a vehicle to carry her from one place of purpose to the next. As she made her way down the stairs, laughter and music trailing behind her, Eleanor felt no sense of ending, only beginnings. As Eleanor stepped into the waiting Rolls-Royce, she paused for just a moment, looking back at the center bathed in the golden light of evening. She thought of the countless people who had walked through those doors carrying invisible battles. She thought of the nights she had doubted herself, wondering if anyone could ever see past her simple clothes, her quiet voice, her refusal to play the game of appearances. She thought of that first day at Cambridge Property Group, the way dismissal had stung more because it was so casual, so practiced, a reflex more than a decision, and she thought of all the ways a single moment can spiral outward, reshaping lives not just with anger, but with grace. Alexander leaned across the seat and squeezed her hand gently. "Are you ready to go?" She smiled at him, her heart full in a way it had not been even a year ago. Ready. As they pulled away from the curb, Eleanor watched the center fade into the distance, knowing it would never really leave her. It was etched into the city's bones now, stitched into its future like a hidden seam of strength. Across town, in a modest office still bearing the Cambridge Property Group name, Philip Turner wrapped up his last appointment of the day. He no longer wore tailored suits daily. He no longer walked with the assumption that value announced itself in brands and bank balances. He closed the file on his desk and stared out the window at the city skyline, thinking about the way Eleanor had changed everything, not with anger or threats, but with persistence, integrity, and an unshakable belief in human dignity. He had joined the advisory board for the Whitmore Center officially now, volunteered weekends, mentored young agents to look beyond appearances, beyond first impressions. He no longer judged success by how many luxury cars parked outside the office, but by how many people left feeling seen and respected. Somewhere deep down, he knew he had been given a rare gift, not a second chance offered from guilt, but an opportunity born from faith that even the most entrenched assumptions could be rewritten. As the weeks turned into months, the Whitmore Center became a launching point for second chances. not just for the residents, but for the volunteers, the donors, the city officials who started rethinking their own policies about inclusion and access. It became a symbol not of charity, but of community. The children who once huddled behind their mother's legs now sprinted down the hallways with laughter. The women who once avoided eye contact now led workshops, gave speeches, mentored the next generation. The sunflower in the rooftop garden remained, its seeds spreading each season, new blooms rising beside it like a living testament to resilience. Eleanor continued to move quietly through it all, never seeking accolades, never craving headlines. Her greatest satisfaction came in the small moments: a resident landing her first job, a child scoring his first goal in adaptive sports, a mother reading her first lease agreement with pride instead of fear. And through it all, Alexander remained by her side, proud but never possessive, supporting her dreams as fiercely as if they were his own. One evening, as the city celebrated the center's second year of success with a candlelight vigil in the garden, Eleanor stood at the edge of the crowd, a small candle flickering in her hand. Around her, hundreds of lights bobbed in the soft darkness, each flame a story, a journey, a triumph. Thomas found her there, grinning up at her. "You did it," he said simply. She shook her head, smiling. "We did it." In the hush that followed, Eleanor thought about how close it all had come to not existing, how easily she could have let that dismissal at the real estate office define her, how easily she could have decided it was not worth fighting to be heard. But she had stayed, she had built, and now the city itself was brighter for it. The lessons remained clear. That judgment at first glance is almost always wrong. That dignity is not a prize to be won, but a truth to be recognized. And that sometimes the simplest souls carry within them the most extraordinary power. As the vigil ended and the crowd slowly dispersed, Eleanor and Alexander walked back toward the waiting car. Not a vehicle of status anymore, but of purpose. As they drove away, the garden lights twinkling in the rearview mirror, Eleanor leaned her head against the window and smiled, not because she had proven anyone wrong, but because she had helped so many find the space to prove themselves right. And somewhere back in an office, somewhere in a corner of the city she loved, Philip Turner set down his coffee cup, looked out over the evening skyline, and said a silent thank you to the woman who had once been judged too simple to matter, and who turned out to be exactly the kind of person who changed everything. As the Rolls-Royce slipped quietly through the quiet streets, Eleanor leaned back against the seat and watched the city unfold outside the window. It was a different city now, or perhaps she was simply seeing it with clearer eyes. Every corner held stories, every building carried lives unseen by most, and somewhere among them, there would always be someone walking into a room for the first time, wondering if they would be judged before they even spoke. Eleanor knew that change did not happen with grand speeches or glittering awards. It happened in the small decisions. The choice to listen instead of assume. The choice to open a door instead of closing it. The choice to see the worth in someone before they proved it. She thought of the young women at the center, of Thomas and Isabel, and even Philip Turner, each carrying forward the lessons they had earned with humility. The city still had its gleaming towers and its heavy doors, but tonight, Eleanor felt sure that there were more keys in more hands than ever before. She smiled to herself, a quiet, contented smile, as the car turned toward home. There was so much left to build, and they were just getting started.